Guys, my guest today, according to his Wikipedia page, has 15 Emmys. He's got 2 Grammys. He's got various medals, decrees, several gift cards. He directed, fucking listen to this list of things. Just one guy directed the whole Civil War, the Vietnam War, the war, jazz, baseball, Prohibition, Hemingway, which I watched several times and recommended to several people. And now he's got a new documentary on PBS. It's his Netflix, right?
Indeed.
Some of us have Netflix. He's got a new one called Da Vinci, about Leonardo Da Vinci.
Most curious man in history.
That is on the PBS app and pbs.org. And his name is Ken Burns. Ken Burns. Hold for applause. It never comes.
It never comes.
No. I watched the movie. It's great. Stylistically, obviously, I'm sure a lot of people brought it up, a departure for you in that there's not... Well, first of all, tell me what qualifies to be a Ken Burns documentary? And like, what's one that's gotten close, but like,
The latter, none. I'm so happy to say, knock on wood. I've finished all this stuff.
But have you sort of had one in development that didn't quite get there?
No, we've done the ones we say yes to, the ones we do. I mean, I've had a situation where I wanted to do something. I just did a little exploration, realized the circumstances would be difficult to do. And so I sort of...
Can you give me some more insight on that?
The Kings, Martin Luther King. I wanted to do something and the family just seemed, at the time, this is like 20 plus years ago, seemed reluctant. But we still have that idea of doing it, but it's certainly not something that's been derailed. It was just wanting to be able to sit in conversation with you and not make an excuse about the film. And all the films are, because of PBS, my Netflix, they're director's cuts. And so, if you don't like them, it's all my fault.
Right.
So Leonardo I was sort of dragged kicking and screaming into it. My dear friend Walter Isaacson is a biographer of Benjamin Franklin. I was working on a film about Benjamin Franklin.
Walter Isaacson in this movie, very little boy energy.
Yeah, he's always that way.
Like, and then
Leonardo does a lot of studies of draperies and cloth. And what it shows is he understands how light hits a curving object.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know if you shot him high angle or something, but he's like, ugh.
Well, he had been pushing at a dinner in D.C. that we were having. We'd been friends for a long time. A twofer, sort of, that I would also do Leonardo. And I said, but I don't do non-American topics. And he sort of pushed through the dinner. It was a little bit awkward, I found. I said, no, Walter, leave it alone. And then I went out and I called my daughter, Sarah Burns, and her husband, David McMahon. I've been collaborating with them for 15 years on various things like the Central Park Five and Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali. We've got 3 or 4 projects lined up.
You EP those or you co-direct those?
We co-direct, and
Central Park 5 also excellent.
And thank you. And they, where a script is required, as in Jackie or Muhammad Ali or Leonardo, write. So they basically said, why not? And I'm going, yeah, why not? Like it was some sort of old dog that needed to be taught a new trick. It was no. So Leonardo, is in an era, the 15th and early 16th century, that there are obviously no photographs or newsreels, just as Benjamin Franklin, and just as a big project I've been working on since 2015 on the history of the American Revolution, is also in a period without photographs. What was great about Leonardo, that David and McMahon and Sarah Burns realized early on, is that his mind is so capacious. There's so much lateral thinking going on that it gave us permission to split the screen and show, four images or 9 images, or to use photographs or even motion pictures, rocket ships taking off, because his mind, so he sort of dreamed for the rest of us the last 500 years, and that was a liberating thing. However, the structure of it, the way it unfolds is, you could look at it next to Hemingway and say, oh yeah, they're doing the same kinds of things, and it's an essential, not a form, it's not a formula.
You think you were doing the same kind of thing, or Hemingway?
No. I mean, I'm just saying that how we structure a biography of Hemingway and Benjamin Franklin and Leonardo are more or less the same. He was born and then he died, and there's lots of stuff in between. What was nice was to be able to exercise this other set of tools that Leonardo gave us permission to use, that had the split screens, that had this sort of exuberant lateral thinking, that was able to say, here is perhaps the most capacious mind in human existence. How do we contain it and represent it and honor it?
Do you worry about self-parody? Do you worry
No,
about?
God, no, I
do you
love
even?
Oh man, I've got 4 daughters. Sarah's my oldest. Lily is a big hotshot film producer. Emily in Paris, Broad City, Search Party, Daisy Samaro, Samantha B. And then I've got a gal is a sophomore in college, and then a 14-year-old. That they all, particularly the little ones, think, the parodies, these withering parodies on The Simpsons.
Ever since he was a young man, Ken Burns has loved 2 things, baseball and jazz.
They so consume my life, I never had time for a proper haircut.
For example, let alone every night show host that's ever existed.
I'm saying, do you worry about it as you're like, I guess we got to do a slow push?
No,
I don't know
not
what
at
else.
all. No. I mean, this is, I'm treating an old photograph or a painting the way a feature filmmaker would a master shot that has, a long shot, a medium shot, a close shot, a tilt, a pan, a reveal, insert of details. It's the tools. And more important, it's how you tell the story, what the calibration is of the various elements that you bring in, oral as well as visuals, that determine whether a story is working or not. And style. I mean, parody is another way of saying that the flip side of parody is style, right? So style, if we could agree, is the authentic application of technique. That is to say, you go to the
correct. I've never seen you use a push incorrectly.
Right. So
it's like, no, that's kind of the most effective thing.
If you sit in the middle of a gallery at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and it's all Cézanne or mostly Cézanne, they look all the same from that distance in the middle, in the bench in the middle. And you go up, and each single painting is its own set of problems. If you don't see problems as pejorative, you see them as just friction to be overcome. Their own set of concerns and dynamics and calibrations of what it's going to do. And that's the same way. You can say, oh yeah, the joke is the zoom in on somebody, the tilt up from somebody. I have to admit that I have a couple of times in later films gone, don't need to tilt up, say to the editor. You don't need to tilt
Look,
up.
I know what you're going for.
To introduce, because, for me, a tilt is a story, right? Because you're revealing. So if you're in the Civil War and you've got this baby-faced kid who may be 14 years old and there are 2 revolvers in his waistband, like you can take his baby face and tilt down to the revolvers. That says something. You can start with revolvers. That says something, and go up to a baby face. Either way, it's a tremendously dynamic story. But you don't need to, unless you're really trying to desperately waste a little bit of time in an introduction, or you're talking about somebody else before you get to that head. There's unless there's something interesting in what's going on, like revolvers and waistbands.
Okay, so when you decide on a subject, people pitch you? No, other than Walter Isaacson.
Well, I mean, no, he pitched me, but it didn't work. And then my daughter, who's family, and I mean, it's like we're in the olive oil business.
You can only reject,
you're
going to keep seeing her.
Then she and David, who'd worked with me a little bit longer, he'd come as an intern during the jazz series in the late 90s. Why not? And then, of course, it was like, of course, why not? And so I've apologized profusely to Walter 10,000 times, but there was no need for an apology. I wasn't going to do a non-American topic until somebody within the inner circle says, well, do it. But it's ideas that we think, that we incubate. So there were, I say this all the time, but if I were given 1,000 years to live, which I am not going to be given, I would not run out of
you look
topics.
pretty good for your age.
In American history. I'm not
97 years.
I'm not I'm not going to run out of topics in American history. And so, as I get older and older, I get a little bit greedier because there's something so great. It's like a high that comes from making a film better, or just laying your head on the pillow at the end of the night and saying, I made that better. And then you wake up the next morning and say, what idiot thought of that? But at least by the time you get to the pillow the next night, you've made it better. And that's all I want to do. So I find as I'm getting older, I keep adding more and more projects. I've already had always had a couple of things going at once, 2 different production teams, and now sometimes it's 3, even 4, and that's just thrilling to me. It's just like
in one office?
No, there's a Brooklyn office where Sarah and Dave are and a handful of people. There's a New York office that now has most of the Revolution folks and another project that's going on Crime and Punishment, different team. That maybe has 20. And then in New Hampshire where I live and work, and used to be, 40, 45 people there. It's now, with remote stuff, maybe there's another 20, 25. It expands and contracts. Remember, this isn't Netflix. I'm not like, nobody's investing, right? I'm getting people to underwrite these films, like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Bank of America.
Viewers like me.
And viewers like you. Thank you.
Viewers like you means PBS put money into it. Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, less so. Foundations like the Arthur
Do you
Binding
feel like
Davis Foundation.
Is it
Am I a congressman? Yeah, but it's okay. It's you get what you pay for, so you put it in. Bank of America's been the sole corporate underwriter, doing maybe 20-25% of a budget. It doesn't work that way, but they've been in since 2006, so that's an awfully long time.
And is that a thing you have to sort of administer?
Yeah, but that's my job. That's why at the end of the credits it always says executive producer Ken Burns. Like if you see a film with 10 executive producers, it's just they're paying off the people who are doing the stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And the great thing about PBS is that I could never make a film about, say, this great football star if that great football star or his widow or daughter or son were an executive producer or producer. They just say, no way. And yet most of the stuff that's out there these days has got some connection. I love this sort of, seems really super old-fashioned, but this honorable thing of PBS, of a real separation. I mean, my underwriters, the people who come in, can come in and look at a cut, but they can't say anything. They can't say, oh, geez.
My only counter argument is, if you like basketball, The Last Dance was worth Michael Jordan's the access journalism angle out of it. I generally am with you. Like I find documentaries have gotten steadily worse as a result.
I don't think that. I think I like The Last Dance a lot, and I've said some stuff not knowing about it that I think hurt the feelings of the producer and director, and so I talked to him and just said, no, I don't know that. But you don't actually know what scenes he did not want in there. And maybe they're none, but you don't know because of his title as part of the credits, Michael Jordan's title. Yeah. You do not know what it is, and you may be missing some element in it. Maybe totally totally entertaining in a way, and that's fine. But like, we can't do that. I mean, we had a review that was released a couple days ago that was excoriating us for not emphasizing more the homosexuality of Leonardo da Vinci. Mm-hmm. We gave you everything there is.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
In the public record. And we're not going to speculate any more than telling you what we know and what was going on at that time and what happened. And so you just kind of go, well, that's your thing, whatever it might be.
Okay, so it raised a thing I want to talk to you about, which is, how much do you feel like it's your job to not judge or it obviously there's ways to lay things out.
Yeah. So Wynton Marsalis said when we were working on Jazz, he's a dear friend now, brother. He said, sometimes a thing and the opposite of a thing are true at the same time. In our binary, our absurd assumption that everything is binary, good and bad, yes and no, us and them, gay and straight, old and young, rich and poor, male and female, whatever it is, they don't exist. Those things don't exist. And so no political argument, no argument actually ever does anything. The only thing that can do something, that is to say transform, is a good story, because a good story comes with its own inherent self-contradiction. And so what you want, what you're drawn to, what makes you say yes to something are lots of those inherent contradictions that make it so complicated. Whether it's the Vietnam War, or it's Leonardo da Vinci, or it's the American Revolution, or it's Huey Long, whatever it might be. And that when you lift your head up when the film is done, it's going to rhyme in the present, as Mark Twain would have said. I mean, it's going to just be, I used to, in every film, go out on the hustings promoting it with a stock speech. What if I told you I'd been working for many years about a film about single-issue political campaigns that metastasized with horrible unintended consequences, about the demonization of recent immigrant groups to the United States, about a smear campaign during a presidential election cycle, about a whole group of people who felt like they'd lost control of their country and wanted to take it back. You'd say, I'm talking about Now. It was a film that came out in 2011, and it was called Prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, what about flappers and gangsters? Yeah, they're there. But the more important thing is that single-issue political campaign that metastasized, and the fact that there was this unbelievably bad, horrible presidential election in 1928. Al Smith was a Catholic running as a Democrat, smeared as a, in the worst possible way. And of course, immigrant groups have always been discriminated against, and there have always been people who feel like there used to be an America that is no longer, because we're getting more complicated. And if we can only just sort of legislate and prescribe that thing, all things will be better. And of course they won't. This is the biggest mistake we made in terms of amendments to the Constitution. The only constitutional amendment so far that pulls back rights, human rights, the only one, and the only one that's been repealed in like a nanosecond when it comes to
by part 3, as I remember.
By part 3, exactly.
I don't want to say I'm a fan, but I broke up with a girl one time, and she said, "Good luck finding someone to watch your old man documentaries with."
That's like the guy who feeds the dog the fresh pet or whatever it is stuff, and the friend thinks it's ridiculous. He's got the dog food in the refrigerator, and the friend's gone. Like. Yeah, you're sticking with the dog food.
You're still here. She's long gone. Well, okay, so so you believe that it's your job to sort of lay it out with as much objectivity as you possibly can.
So what?
Because the thing that for the people who haven't seen it yet, Vincent had an intern,
Leonardo Da Vinci.
I'm sorry. It's a different movie.
Leonardo, Vincent Van Gogh, tortured artist, cut off his ear.
Leonardo had an intern, and he brought in when he was like 13, and then they ended up having.
Well, but he was an intern, then he was an apprentice, then he was.
And he was a bad boy at one point.
For a while, he was a bad boy, and then eventually became part of the household. And eventually, we think, but we have no proof that he became a lover.
Yes.
So as did another person that was in the household.
And you just go, you're watching like 500 years ago. The people back then.
He was arrested. Leonardo was arrested on a charge of sodomy with 3 other men. Somebody had made the charge, and. They got off because one of the other guys was the son of a very rich guy.
Yeah.
And that's what we know. This is just public record.
Yeah.
Leonardo he's got 4,000 pages of his codex, but they're not diaries, I feel terrible today, or I fell in love with this person, or whatever it is. So anything you want to do to extrapolate, it just means you're now subscribing to a particular theory, or in history, it's historiography, a particular fashion of historiography. It might be Freudian, it might be Marxist, it might be queer studies, it might be Afrocentrism, it might be symbolism, it might be deconstruction. At the end of the day, a good story, complicated narrative, can contain all of those perspectives and unify them. And the point I want to make more than anything is that the presumption is that you make a film that you're building something, that it's additive. It is not. It is subtractive. Like, I live in New Hampshire. We make maple syrup. It takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. We are shooting at least 40 times the material that we need. And then we are, pretty quickly getting it down to, say, in Leonardo, 4-hour film, we're getting down to 8. And then getting down to 6 is really complicated. And then getting it down from 4 1/4 is the hardest thing ever.
How do you screen it for people 4 hours straight?
No, we might show folks. We might bring in first scholars that have worked with us, scholars that might be in the film, other colleagues. We then after we've got it down, we might just bring in what we call warm body, a friend of ours that doesn't know about filmmaking and doesn't know about Leonardo, and just watch them watch. And it's not like a panel discussion. You
just know when it's on somebody's bored
being
and
present. You know, they shift their leg, they turn over. You see, they whatever it is.
What was your impetus for starting? Like, were you sort of, did you see were you like an angry young man who felt like documentaries weren't being done exactly right, or it was just
there was
trying
lots
to...
of different documentaries. So my trajectory, my mom had cancer from before I was aware.
Yeah, what's the Ken Burns on Ken Burns? Go ahead.
And it took her a decade to die, and I watched it as my brother did. There wasn't a moment when you didn't feel there was just this, it's like a horror film, this evil outside the house about to rob us of that. So no real childhood.
Was that the sort of feeling that, looking back, it felt like a foreboding?
Oh yeah. So I love baseball.
Yeah, because it was a long illness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, by the time she'd been sick for a while. By the time I was like 2.5 and 3 and realized something was really wrong. And then when I was 7, we learned that she would die soon, like 6 months. She said, "No, I'll get you to junior high," which seemed like this impossibly great, throwing the Hail Mary at the end of the football game, and that would be great. She missed it by just a couple months, God bless her. But it was really tough. Afterwards, my father had a pretty strict curfew, but he'd forgive it on even school nights up to 1 a.m. watching old movies with him or going out to the theater, sometimes seeing a 10 o'clock show, and he loved it. And one day we were watching a movie. I was now 12, maybe 6 months after my mom died in 1965. And we were looking at a movie at home on TV called Odd Man Out, starring by Sir Carol Reed, starring James Mason, about the Irish troubles of the 19-teens and 20s. He started to cry. And I'd never seen my dad cry. Hadn't cried when she was sick, hadn't cried when she died, hadn't cried at this impossibly sad funeral. Cried there. And so at that point I remember saying this, I got it. I forgave him. I just said, whatever stuff he's been dealt, he didn't have a safe haven, and the emotional dynamics of film gave him a safe haven. And I said I wanted to be that harbor. And I
consciously?
Yeah. I said, I didn't say harbor, but in my mind I went, I want to be a
13-year-old.
I want to be at 12, I want to be a filmmaker. And that meant Hollywood. That meant Howard Hawks, John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock. That was it. But I ended up going to Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, which was a new experimental school. It opened the year before in 1970. I came in 71. And all of my teachers there were social documentary still photographers. And they reminded me that Hollywood calls itself the industry, And while they have silhouettes of palm trees and not smokestacks on their stationery, it's still an industry. And so all of a sudden I realized that truths that can be drawn out of things that are happening or did happen are as valid as ones that are completely made up. And so all of a sudden, by 18, I'm now interested in documentary. And it's funny, I came out of Hampshire at 22. The last thing I did, the equivalent of a senior thesis, Hampshire does still experimenting, still wonderful, still transformative, and not transactional the way every other secondary education is. There are no seniors and there's no thesis, but I was, whatever the senior thesis was, Division 3 it was called, was a film whose last shot was a pan across a painting. And if you told me
yours?
Yeah.
That's funny.
And if you told me that I'd be doing that in, however many years it is now since graduation, more than 50, I would say you were crazy. But that's what I've done. And so I've been very, very lucky to know what I've done. But I've been trying to make decisions that are not consciously the opposite, not obstinately the opposite. That's maybe the better word. It's just that I find that sometimes the momentum of things or the expected path isn't right. I remember the third film I made was on Huey Long, the turbulent Southern demagogue, and I met and interviewed and got to be really good friends with Robert Penn Warren, Red Warren. And he really kind of adopted me in a wonderful, wonderful way. I love that man so much. And I told him I was thinking about the Civil War, and he told me to go look up Shelby Foote. So the first rolls of film, literally 1 through 8, were the first interview we did with Shelby. But once he looked at me, and he just said, "Careerism is death." And he just had these goggle-eyed, snapping turtle eyes, and he would just said it with a ferocity, like it was like, "Yes, sir." And I think that's right, because career is, and I never use the word career. I always say my professional life, always. And career is something that often locks you into someone else's determination of what's the best for you, like the route to be. The parents who want you to be a doctor is the classic example, but we make our own traps. We set our own minefields for ourselves. And I just felt that if I could listen to that dictum, careerism is death, that you could figure out how to make choices that were not about career choices, but about professional life. What did I need? And
it sounds like it's mostly curiosity.
It's all about curiosity and how not to kill it. So the things that, I've made the films, all of them have been director's cuts. It's been a wonderful thing. And every time anybody said, well, why don't you, they see going to Hollywood and making a feature film like the next run on a ladder. And I understand how that is for many people. It's just not for me. I feel like I've found the work I'm supposed to do.
I agree with you in a lot of ways. And whenever people that are doing a thing and they're like, now I want to, it's like the thing, you're so good at this thing. And you have a market that didn't really exist.
Right.
You made it.
I did. It wasn't even a market. I just thought I wanted to do. I'd done all these films on the Brooklyn Bridge, on the Shakers, on Huey Long, on the Statue of Liberty, on the Congress, and the painter Thomas Hart Benton. And all of those films had as a determining factor, casting a long shadow over the drama of all of those disparate subjects, was the Civil War, the most important event in American history. And suddenly I said, I got to do it. And was no longer going to be an hour and a half film of still photographs. This was going to be originally 5 1-hours, and then it ended up
sounds like the worst movie ever.
Yeah.
5 hours of still photographs.
I was turned down. I was turned down by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that had supported all the other work, because no one on the jury felt that anyone's attention could be sustained across 5 episodes, 5 1-hour episodes on a subject. That film ended up being nearly 12 hours and 9 episodes, and it's still 34 years plus later the highest rated program in public television history, and nobody was supposed to watch it. I was told by those critics that Stephen Bochco has a new police procedural, only they're singing, called Cop Rocks, and I will be blown out of the water by this. And
are you proud of that?
I guess so, because I just told you that. I don't know why I should be, because I don't begrudge Stephen Bochco's genius.
Not the Bochco portion of it. Just the idea that you were told no, and you were like, I don't know, guys. I feel vindicated. Got rejected a lot.
Oh God, I used to for Brooklyn Bridge. I looked 12 years old, and everybody would say, "This kid is trying to sell me the Brooklyn Bridge," and I could write a novel just about trying to raise the money for the Brooklyn Bridge.
How much did you have to raise?
It turned out to be $180,000, but that would be like telling me now $180 million to go do that. And I got paid 2 cents an hour. At one point, the best story is Meade Esposito, the boss of Brooklyn, the head of the Kings County Democratic Club. He died in jail. Calls me up to I had breakfast today on Montague Street, on his 2nd or 3rd floor office on Montague Street. And he hands me a check for $1,000. At least it wasn't cash. And he says something to the effect like, nobody makes a film about my bridge what we're not involved in it.
He said what we're not involved.
Something kind of
like literary like that. Yeah.
Literary like that. Exactly. And it's just one of a dozen kind of crazy stuff that happened in the course of doing that. But I used to save in 2 big 3-ring binders. I can't find them anymore, so maybe I'm lying. 2 3-ring binders, each with 200 pages of rejections for the Brooklyn. Dear Mr. Burns, thank you so much for your unfortunately, this is, and I just kept them there as a reminder that it's just not easy. There's lots of friction and resistance.
Yeah. You know, I genuinely have a soft spot for the holidays, guys. You wouldn't know it to look at me. It doesn't fit the brand, but I do. It's sweet. I like the songs. I like the music. I like togetherness, sweaters, red, green. But it can be a lot. It can be very demanding, going to all the events, dinners, looking for gifts. And every year I tend to burn out quicker than the last. Plus, I don't like it's cloudy now, and it's kind of getting cold. So I don't like that either. You don't know what's doing what, but maybe it has to do with getting older. But this year, I don't plan to burn out at all or get sad from the weather. Getting older is inevitable, but feeling older isn't. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in our cells by taking something called NMN. NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health, improve blood pressure, regulate blood sugar levels, and support many other health markers. Finding high-quality, pure NMN is hard, so I use Verso. They conduct third-party testing for each batch produced to guarantee you get what you pay for. It contains the highest quality NMN and other research-backed ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down aging. After taking Cell Being for some time, I feel like a younger version of Neal. I've noticed the fact that I don't need as much sleep the past few weeks. I wake up better rested. I've been running. That works also. Click the link in the description or head on over to ver.so and use coupon code NEAL at checkout to save 50% off your first order. That's ver.so and use coupon code NEAL at checkout to save 15% off your first order. Verso. Go there now. ver.so. It's actually good stuff. I've been using it, and I was like, oh, this is actually good. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey, guys, I'm going to see some family for the holidays as I record this. And I'm bracing myself because who knows what's going to happen. But anything can happen at a Brennan function. But I feel good because I'm like mentally prepared, and I have some ideas that I'm going to, and these are ideas that I've developed in years past with therapists about how to deal with family. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. Again, all I do is talk about therapy. Helped me immeasurably in my life. It's given me other things to do that help me. I got a psychiatrist, whatever. It's just hugely helpful. It's for everyone. Literally, don't you want to go to someone that's objective and has some idea of how to navigate somewhat inner turmoil? You don't have to be like, jacked up and suffer some major trauma. It's just helpful. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/NEAL today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/NEAL. BetterHelp.com/Neal. Go to therapy, use BetterHelp. I promise you, it will be good. I want to get into a block. He was nice enough to write down 3 blocks. His first block is temper. Now, I kind of knew that was coming.
Huh.
And the reason I knew it was coming is because your films are, like, there's one editor that got credit on this one. I'm sure there's a lot of assistant editors.
For episode 1 of Leonardo, it's one, and then there's a second editor that's Kim Mealy for episode 1, Woody Richmond. And then we have an assistant and an apprentice, and sometimes.
But painstaking.
These are handmade things,
yeah,
and very small. When you take even something as big as the American Revolution, it's however many people we have. It's basically made by a dozen and a half people.
Okay, tell me about temper.
So temper is more an internal, personal thing. So. The best example I know is that I could be untying my sneakers at night all alone, except for my dog. And it just doubles into a knot. And I'm like, oh, and then I'm starting to try to be paid. And then it's getting tighter and tighter. And so I'm suddenly swearing, or something falls off, and I'll be walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, which I do every time I'm in New York. At least I hope. I
It's
try
the
to do it
least-
once
the
a
least you
day.
can do.
The
Go
least
ahead.
I can do just to visit my bridge. And you want people to love the bridge, and it is beloved by everyone on earth. And people get married up there, and I filmed people just in the intervening years since my film was out. Brides, even today, I saw as I was walking from Brooklyn Heights back to Manhattan, I just saw people taking pictures, every language you can imagine. And in the afternoon, when I sometimes had the privilege of going, oh, it's just jammed. And I can see myself like, get out of my way. And I'm going, what? I'm not saying it out loud, but I'm like going, okay, where does that come from? That impatience, the temper. And so that's something.
How are you as a boss?
Oh no, I don't. There's no yelling. This is not brain surgery, and I don't even think yelling in brain surgery helps the situation. No, this is just making documentary films. We don't yell. The people who end up as yelling don't end up working very long, and we get along. And
Does it get intense?
It gets passionate in that it's not people fighting over what they want. I may say this, and Sarah and Dave and Leonardo will feel something differently, or maybe one of them agrees with me and one of them doesn't, or vice, whatever it might be.
How often do you walk up to the monitor and touch it?
No, I never pull. The ultimate thing is I suppose the ultimate say, but it'd be such a stupid thing.
No, but I'm saying like I need it here.
Oh,
Start here,
No,
and then
I might be unequivocal about it, but the temper thing is more like I'm always surprising myself that I have this kind of quick break. I don't yell at anybody else. I just watch. I can just swear out loud. The toothpaste cap falls down and rolls under the thing and the dust, and it's like all of a sudden there's this blue streak when it could just as easily have just been taken up and put back on.
Do you find yourself it's getting in your way? What do you think it's getting in your way? It's not what your plan was. It's not.
Here's what I've come to understand. We're rarely present, which is the only place where we can be. And that for me, probably described as type A, there's a kind of movements. And so that keeps you sort of propelled and doing things and getting things done. That's all very good, but you're not necessarily present.
Mm-mm.
And I think that temper is a part of the slavery to not being present. That you wish to control things.
It's making you be present.
I don't think it is. I think it's a manifestation of the thing that is keeping you from being present. To be present is to go, shoes get snots, caps of toothpaste fall. People are visiting the bridge you want them to visit.
Right.
You don't need to want to say out loud, and you never would, get the fuck out of my way.
Yeah.
But, they stop, they take pictures, and
Right.
you've got something to do. You've got to get there and across
Yeah.
and pick up, your daughter from school, whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, I've been telling myself recently, like, no moment is better than another one.
No, well, there's only one.
Right.
And so these are very superficial descriptions, but kind of obsession with the past, where the past owns you, is a depressive state, where the future owns you is an anxious state.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening right now is perfect.
Yeah, I know, but it's
hard to be there.
The reason I think you cuss when the thing rolls under the thing is because you're like, you're making me be present now.
Well, that's
you motherfucker. I was on my way to a better place, and you're making me stop. You're making me park the car.
It's funny because I set some sort of ridiculous personal habits to sort of, try to be present. Like every time I walk over the Brooklyn Bridge, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And the best moment happens when it's a suspension bridge. There are cables that are draped over these big towers and compression.
Is there a documentary I can watch about it?
Yeah, fortunately. And then the roadway's held up by these vertical suspenders, but there are also these diagonal suspenders, radiating stays, they're called. And when you get to that place where the radiating stays come out, you've got this unbelievable, it's like a combination of a musical notebook, but it's also the Gothic towers in the background and the steel in tension and the towers in compression. It's just beautiful. It's why it's attracted so many artists. And so I've made this deal with myself to to like try to be present in that approach to the Brooklyn Tower as I'm walking, east to west to Manhattan, to see the Brooklyn Tower, the east side of it, and to see the Manhattan Tower, the east side of it. And sometimes I realize, you're lost in thought, or you just were thinking about this, and it's usually some complaint or whatever, and you've lost the present. So I'll actually turn around and try to catch it on the other way, just to be present.
Yeah, and you have to stop.
Yeah, just a quiet, just a kind of quiet.
70-year-old man, fucking stop.
Yes, exactly.
Learn something. Where are you spiritually?
I am.
Okay.
So
I ask because you watch Da Vinci and you're like, it's hard. A friend of mine said one time, he's like, it would be hard to watch a child being born and remain an atheist.
Yes.
That was his.
My first two daughters were born in my bedroom at home. The first time there was a midwife, a friend of my wife's and mine and my wife. So that's 4 people. And nobody entered the door, and then there were 5 people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the best ghost story of all times. And that's my oldest daughter, who is now co-directing with me, equal in every way and respect in this process.
She wouldn't leave the room either.
She wouldn't leave the room either. She's great. No, it's
But watching Da Vinci it makes you go like,
So you look at what the stock and trade of all of these guys, and it had been true in medieval and Middle Ages time, was to do stuff of famous church scenes. But this is the Renaissance. So we've centered humanism in the face of it. It's not just all of these stories. So when he does a story from the Bible, the Annunciation or the Adoration of the Magi or the Madonna and Child, he's got these complex psychodramas that are going on. He understands them as narratives and stories.
I'm not even talking about those. I'm talking about the breadth of his
knowledge,
abilities.
Yes. It's rooted in nature, which is perfect, and we are imperfect. And so everything has to do with proportion, with microcosm and macrocosm. And he doesn't see, as we all do, he doesn't have the binary systems that have these disciplines, the silos of musical genres or of academic disciplines. He is the greatest artist of the age, if not of all time. He is the most famous painting on earth is his, but he's only done 20 paintings and only half of those are finished. But he's also the greatest scientist of the age, and he's never had a microscope or a telescope. He's an anatomist, a botanist. He knows about aerodynamics and flight. He knows about fossils and rocks and atmosphere. He's an inventor. He's an architect. And he would never have acknowledged any of the distinctions between that. He played music. He sang beautifully. He staged elaborate theatricals. He clearly knew just about everything. I mean, he's the biggest mind I've ever come in contact with. And he's dealing with that question that you're asking. And he's not going to automatically assume anything about it. I love our founders, who are basically riffing off a few centuries later the same energy of the Renaissance and the age of exploration and the age of enlightenment, which is they're deists, right? They believe in a supreme being, but one is that's disinterested in us and does not distinguish between faiths. The first thing is not freedom of the speech and assembly. It's not establishing a religion. And that came from that impulse that we ought to just say there are lots of ways in to whatever this thing is. For Leonardo, and then later for Emerson and Thoreau and John Muir, it's through nature, to worship God in cathedrals made in nature, not by cathedrals made by man.
He didn't really talk that much about God. Did he talk about God in his notebooks?
He has a sense of God as the same sort of thing. He admires the creativeness of the creator.
Right.
And so he's dealing with the byproducts, the perfection of nature in a dragonfly or in a snail shell or in just the eddies of water in a rushing, babbling brook. So yes, there is very much a powerful sense, but he's also not accepting a catechism or a dogma to superimpose on that. He understands that a church and its teachings are itself a kind of mediation between whatever the supreme being is and us. each of us in our own way. And that's, for a non-American topic, that's pretty American, or at least we're a riff on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking you could name it Da Vinci Beyond Autistic, because this guy's it's like, man, my girlfriend was like, he might be autistic. It's like, this isn't no one's autistic in 10 different categories.
So it's not even that. He was, as one of his biographers said, a work of art before he began doing it. He was great to be around, great companion, great conversationalist, great involved with people. You want him at that dinner. That proverbial mythical.
If Lincoln will shut the fuck up.
If Lincoln will come. Oh, Lincoln would listen.
Oh, well, let me do another block. Being kind.
So Leonardo grew up, and around him was Machiavelli.
It was also funny that he interacted with Machiavelli and Michelangelo.
And Machiavelli comes with a kind of pejorative, automatic, it's a negative thing. But Machiavelli's about how you get things done. Right? He understands that in a world that sees things in a binary fashion, there's expediencies and there's tactics and strategies that you can do that. We know that a Roy Cohn, for example, is the kind of apotheosis of how not to do this. We've attributed to Machiavelli and his prince these kinds of overthinking,
but it doesn't mean
strategies.
That Machiavelli was actually behaving this way.
Right. I think he's just a very astute observer, and he may have been, but I think we can take from Machiavelli. We don't have to just buy into the idea that Machiavellian for us right now is a pejorative adjective, right? We would say that wasn't a good thing, that we were calculating and whatever. But we all calculate, and there is a kind of calculus to everything. And what I meant by be kind was, in a way, if the temper thing is an internal kind of reaction, it feels base and crude to the inevitable vicissitudes that visit all of us, like the cap falling off the toothpaste and rolling under the thing, or mother's dying, or the shoelace tied in a knot. Then the outward thing is how not to plot an advantage, but to be kind. I had an experience when there used to be tolls on 95 driving to New York from New Hampshire, and there was a whole series of them that you threw a quarter or 50 cents later on before they took them down into these baskets. And I found myself in the exact change lane well before Easy Passes and all this. And I didn't have any change. All I had was $1, and it was 50 cents, and I didn't know what to do. And the line in the other lanes were filled up, and I just had to sandwich in. There was nothing to do. It's the super highway. So I'm coming in, and some guy is just giving me the finger and leaning on the horn and whatever, and I'm shrugging my shoulders, going, I don't have any other option than to break in here. And he's just leaning on the horn, and I get up and I get to the woman. I hand her my $1. I said, I'm paying for myself and the guy behind me. And then I took off like a bat out of hell. And maybe 5-6 miles later, he catches up and he's going like this, and he's really, thanking me and beeping the horn, this time in a kind way, and waving like, thank you, man, like that. And I just realized the extent to which the transformation of ourselves, this does more for me than it does for him. He's going to go home. Yeah. It's going to be the story of the day for him. And I recall this every few years and remember it kind of.
What a great guy you are. Yeah.
What a great guy I am. That it transforms you. And so there's something about kindness, I think, that has that. It's an outer expression of this thing about being present. Like
this had the added bonus of being passive aggressive as well.
You think?
Yeah, because he's honking at you, and then you get like, well, turns out I'm a saint.
I thought it was like the hippie bumper stickers of random acts of kindness.
Yeah.
That it had a kind of, I could do this too. I could respond, and my temper, by the way, in driving can be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was like, how do you negotiate your own stuff, either the embarrassment or the anger of what he's doing? I remember the first time I'd ever heard my dad swear. My brother and I were coming back, and they'd changed some streets in Ann Arbor to go one way where they had been two ways, or vice versa. And my dad started to make a turn into the street, and suddenly he realized, oops, and he corrected. It was nothing. But the guy waiting at a light was more than happy to give him the finger and lean on the horn and whatever. And we were sort of scared of my dad. He had moods and stuff like that. We were in the back seat. We got some lumber from the lumber yard or something. And my dad just leans out the window and goes, "Fuck you, Jackson." Just like that. And my brother and I look at each other like, how does he know that word?
Yeah.
Because it's like the word we learned at school and he can't possibly know that. And so then, we're now we're freaked out. We're worried that this is the end. And so we're down crouched behind the car, and my dad, to his credit, sort of, like in his own anger and then finally funk and self-involvement and all the stuff, whatever burdens he had, he finally just sort of realizes there's total silence from the back seat. He turns around and he goes, "How about that, boys? Fuck you, Jackson." So from then on, my mom had just been dead a year. From then on, we swore in our family all the time. Like we would just like draw out everything we could swear. And my dad finally, at the end of the day, he goes, "Look, we can swear. The three of us can swear, but you cannot swear with anybody else, Not with grandmother, not with you, we're just going to take this. It's just the secret that the three of us know."
Yeah.
And it was great. In fact, later on, I named a dog Jackson and delighted.
Was Jackson the guy's name? Did he know the guy, or was Jackson
No, Jackson's
just like
what you say is Joe or Bub or whatever. Jackson was "screw you, Jackson," and but he didn't say "screw you." And so I actually named a dog after Jackson and got delighted in telling my daughters that story over and over again.
How were you with cursing with them?
Pretty good. I told them that story. I mean, there was one moment when my oldest daughter, Sarah, was in her, early teens and kind of getting morose. And I never yelled at the first two girls at all. Didn't have to. But I made their lunch every day. I was a single dad. And one day she came down and looked at this peanut butter and Nutella sandwich. Oh, I have to preface this by saying that we'd heard this joke from somebody that was kind of common in our family. We thought the perfect one-liner about the guy, the rube from the country who goes to New York and knows the reputation of New Yorkers. And he goes up to a cop and he said, "Can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall, or should I just go fuck myself?" Right? And so we just love that in our family. So Sarah comes in, sees me making the thing I've made for years every day, peanut butter and Nutella. She goes, "No, I don't want that." And I said, "Okay, sweetie, what would you like?" She goes, "I want tuna fish." So I said, "Okay, I can make tuna fish salad." So she goes off. She comes back about 20 minutes later. I've made the tuna fish. She goes, "No, not like that." And this is a girl that I was feeling like I was losing. It was puberty and whatever. It was this sad face, nothing. And I said, "Sweetie, would you like me to continue making your lunches, or should I just go fuck myself?" And she just cracked a smile. It was like the fever broke, and whatever it was, that was it. They went on to whatever, but that was...
How long did they have the period of resenting you as a dad? Have they I went to therapy and have they had that?
Well, not Sarah, but I mean, resentment, you got to ask them.
Yeah.
It's always complicated. Parents are always flawed. I mean, it's the world's, most exclusive but largest club, right? And nobody knows going in. There's nobody who knows going in. And I feel more important to me than being a filmmaker is being a father of these four girls. It's just, everybody who knows me would say he's not bullshitting you now. And so the girls would have to tell you. I'm sure.
Did you know going in, I probably won't be good at that, I will be good at that, and were you surprised by it?
I was scared out of my mind, which is probably a good thing. And my first wife was so good, so natural, a mother, that she taught me a lot of things. And
that you could do? Because it's one thing to see them do it, but it's another thing.
Not taught in any didactic way, just imparted. And so I watched her, and it's really great to watch my grown daughters who now have kids of their own, 2 kids of their own, each boy and a girl, how good mothers they are and how patient. And it just reminds me of my first wife's just absolute, it was the best job. I mean, that was her job. She loved it. I mean, I kept begging her not to retire from filmmaking. She was the editor of that Brooklyn Bridge film and the writer of that and the writer of a film on the Shakers. And then we had Sarah, and she just wanted to stay with it, please. She just loved the job of mother.
It's official, guys. The holidays are around the corner. That means lights, gifts, and get-togethers. A famous rapper who's one of the best rappers ever, and he kind of had a breakdown, once told a friend of mine that he had very bad BO. Just straight up told him, yo, bro, you smell bad. I'm not saying you should do that, but we don't all smell good. Look, I'm going to be honest. They sent me Mando. I showed you when I ran out. I didn't get more, okay? And I wanted to sort of A-B it, see how I was without it. And I swear to God, I'm in like a BO pocket right now. Like 2.5 weeks, I've just been like every day where I'm like, what is it? Is someone cooking? And it's me alone in my house, and it's my armpits, and they're cooking body odor. So I literally today, they also sent me a cream, and I used that because I'm like, why? I'm not going to use a cream on my armpits. Then I was like, why not, Neal? So I put on their deodorant cream. And so far, so good. We're several hours in, and I like what we're doing. I prefer stick, but the cream, fine. What do I care? And I could have put it more places. I didn't today. I think the cream, I don't know what the flavors of the cream are. You know, I like a Mount Fuji with the deodorant. And that's just what I like. I like a fresh, maybe a little on the high note. It's like a high note. Guys, here's a special offer. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code and link. Use code NEAL at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers or to secure some last-minute stocking stuffers. Comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, both of which I endorsed here, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes. Use the wipes, good stuff, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code that equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code NEAL at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Promo code Neal. Don't let the meat sweats get you this holiday season. Your family and friends will thank you. Smell better than everybody at the function. Mando. Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. The busy holiday season is here, and Uncommon Goods makes it less stressful with incredible hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that it's exactly what I wanted feeling. They scour the globe. They do. For original, handmade, absolute, remarkable things. Somehow they know exactly the perfect gift for every single person you know. Here's a few of my favorite gifts that I found on their site. I talked about this before, but I stand by it. It's like a viewfinder, like I don't know if it was Fisher from like the 80s, the viewfinder, but you load in personal photos of, in this case, my girlfriend's kid. He was kind of blown away. My girl was blown away from like, oh my God, I remember these. But this catalog really has like, it's not a catalog, it's a website. I'm old. You're like, oh, these are good. It's not just like, get your dog on a tie or like your initials on a keychain. It's actually cool. Like, oh, how do they, this is a cool thing. I'm glad they sell this. When you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small independent businesses. Many of their handcrafted products are made in small batches, so shop now before they sell out this holiday season. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/blocks. That's uncommongoods.com/blocks for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. Try not to make the others wrong.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
So
It's a block.
my best friend,
Mm-hmm.
David Blistein, I've known since for 50 plus years. He was at Amherst and a year ahead of me, and I was at Hampshire, down the road 4 miles, the hippie school. When I was about to get married for the second time, my then soon-to-be second wife asked David what was the secret to his very, very long marriage. And he said, we try not to make the other wrong, which is all human beings do. That's the whole nature of human existence. I had a Marine in my Vietnam film, now a very close friend, who, when we just got him to describe what he did one day, and he was a little embarrassed about having to describe what he got a whole bunch of medals for, which he threw away in protest of the war when he got back. He one of the ways he deflected, he just said, look, it's the history of the world. And that gave us the title of our 8th episode. And then later when he threw the medals away, he said, it was a disrespectful loyalty, meaning to throw the medals away. And he was trying to be loyal to something bigger than the current policies of the Nixon and Johnson administration. Anyway, these things that we do, the history of the world, comes about from finding an other. Like I've always said, I've made films about the U.S. for more than 50 years, great privilege. But I've also made films about us. That is to say, the 2-letter lowercase plural pronoun, all of the intimacy of us and we and our, and all of the majesty and the complexity, the contradiction, and even the controversy of the U.S. It's my job, and I love it, and I'm good at it. But what you see is that human beings make the other wrong. It's just immigrants, or it's trans
just
people.
In-group, out-group, us, them, me, you.
It's always the simplest and most direct way to separating ourselves from the common humanity. That is, we also have an instinctual thing to help people. The Duck Dynasty people were out in their boats during that Hurricane Rita or whatever it was in Houston and Louisiana saving black and brown people.
It's been devastating to watch our brothers and sisters and neighbors go through so much. So we're here to say, hey, it's time for the Christian people in this area to get out and help out.
We have that as well. There's some idiot threw a rock through the picture window of a family in Billings, Montana in 1993. And because the family was displaying a menorah at Christmas time. And so the Billings newspaper, whatever it's called, printed a full-page picture of a menorah, and thousands of Christians scotch-taped a menorah to their picture windows during the Christmas. That's us as well.
Yeah.
But to not make the other wrong is to realize that one way to do it is that if our relationship is well, that's because of you. If it's not going well, that's because of me. Like you always want to give away the thing that everything in our culture tells us to do the opposite thing.
Do you think it's our culture, or do you think it's the human spirit?
It's the human spirit.
Yeah.
But our cultures are the manifestations of that at a particular time. And people are always saying, yeah, but it's worse now, the attention spans. When the Telegraph came out, people complained that there'd be the death of literature and writing. And,
Have you found it's gotten easier? Meaning like the instinct is, fuck you. And then do you find like, Ken, relax?
I'm a work in progress. I think that I'm trying really hard. There are lots of things in my life that are reminders, groups of people that I talk to, ideas that we circulate, the work itself. I gravitate towards telling the stories of wars. I mean, after the Civil War series came out, I just said, we are not doing another war. It hurt too much. It hurt. And those Civil War soldiers, North and South, in combat had been in combat, said they'd seen the elephant, which I assume was the most exotic thing they could think of for what combat is, which is unlike anything else anybody could experience. When your imminent death is possible at any moment, as it is not right now as we speak, you are vivified. Your experience of life is vivified. Then how you turn it off or are unable to turn it off determines everything, or survive or don't survive, or wounded or whatever it might be. It's so transformative, and one presumes quite correctly that wars reveal the worst of us. They also reveal the best.
Yeah.
And they become stages, theaters. They even call wars theaters, where you can see played out just unbelievable dynamism. And that's why, when I'd heard at the end of the 90s that nearly 40%, I think that was the figure, of graduating high school seniors thought we fought with the Germans against the Russians in the Second World War. And that 1,000 veterans, American veterans, were dying each day. That number is way smaller than that because of the actuarial tables. Yeah. I just said we're going to do World War II. And before the ink was dry on World War II.
Kind of based on that factoid? Just
on those two factoids. And then before the ink was dry, we were locking it in December of 2006 for a broadcast in the fall of 2007. I said, we're doing Vietnam. And 10 and a half years later, in the fall of 2017,
I'm picturing you wearing like army fatigues.
I said we're going to do. Well, actually, when we were locking Vietnam in December of 2015, a month before the Iowa caucuses, out of which Donald Trump was not supposed to emerge, I said we're doing the American Revolution, and so we've been plowing that. They're always the most complicated things to work on, the most moving parts, the most susceptible to hagiography, hero worship, susceptible to common stuff. Betsy Ross didn't do this. Nathan Hale didn't say, I regret that I had one life to give. No one said, don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. There's lots of stuff to let go of. And most people have never even heard of the things I've said anyway.
But I would also argue like they were never especially useful.
They weren't useful, like wooden teeth and
and
telling lies. Everybody tells a lie. Chopping down cherry tree. All this stuff keeps you.
I've never seen any of your documentaries. You were speaking of liars. I'm kidding. I've seen them.
You just had to say.
I don't know who you are.
Anyway, this is it's the history, as Tommy Vallely is his name, Corporal Tommy Vallely now. Older than me and alive, thank goodness, and still working in Vietnam. But it's the history of the world, and that there you can find in this stuff the real nub of who we are.
Yeah, I hadn't watched The World at War, the BBC one, and I watched it. It's 26 hours.
Yeah,
and well, all right. Here's before I even say, do you watch stuff like that before you start to see what's left on the bone, so to speak?
I'd seen it on. No, I the second I decide to do something, I don't watch anything that's done.
Got it.
So I'd seen it or parts of it as a kid, and what I understood is that it's pretty much top down. And so what we did is we took 4 geographically distributed American towns: Waterbury, Connecticut; Mobile, Alabama; Sacramento, California, each with about 100,000 people on December 7th. 1941, and then tiny Laverne, Minnesota, and told the entire story of the cataclysm, the greatest cataclysm in human history, World War II, through their eyes, and a couple of ringers. But it's trying to be bottom up as well as top down. You knew what was going on, but you also needed to know the guy who's in the water outside the Indianapolis where the sharks are taking down. Like, you're this far away, we're both hanging on a piece, and all of a sudden you go, and he never sees you again.
Yeah.
And you want that story, or the guy who's up in a bomber plane and he's ladling out the blood, or the guy who can't hold the joystick of his bomber because he's just killed so many Germans, and so he has to do that. And to this day, his wife knows which cup of coffee, which hand to hand the cup of coffee.
Do you think those
morning.
guys, do you think that there was, you watch it and you're like, this is so awful.
Awful.
It's so
awful.
You want to scream watching it.
Yes.
I was sending clips to my friends. Like, the fact that I ever said anything negative about anyone from that generation, it's like, I take it all, but I did not know.
You did not know. And in fact, the argument about the atomic bomb, it's easy for us to make a kind of moral thing about why would you use it and unleash this thing. But the estimates for the number of years and dead are so outrageous. By the time the Japanese surrendered, there were 292,000 combat deaths, a total of about 408, 410 total deaths, meaning missing, accidents, all this sorts of stuff. So that's a lot. It was going to double for the invasion.
Was the
Japan.
thing they had Purple Hearts ready? You ever heard that thing?
Oh yeah, and I mean
they produced 100,000 Purple Hearts for all the people that were gonna die, Americans that were gonna die in Japan.
Yeah, well, Purple Hearts are for wounded.
I'm sorry, whatever the other one is.
Dying is they maybe 1 million dead Americans, probably 6, 7, 8 million dead Japanese, and didn't happen. 150,000 people's lives were sacrificed with this horrific bombs. But you can't tell anybody who was there thinking about where their husband or where their son might go that wouldn't have said that was not a good decision. That goes against my liberal upbringing, goes against my all of that stuff. But
when I watched and then I watched World War, I'm like, oh, they weren't surrendering. There was no chance of surrender.
No.
The question I was going to ask is, do you think that generation, there's like a humility to not talking about it? But also, do you think it's just like self-preservation and PTSD and like, I don't want to think about it?
The depression, that's a really good question, Neal.
Finally.
Yeah, how far into
No,
this
I know we're
damn
done.
thing are we?
Let's, if you have a good answer, we can get the fuck out of here. But if not, we got another half hour.
Shit. Okay. So the depression tempered people to do without and understood about shared sacrifice. Second World War asked for extraordinarily stepped up shared sacrifice, which everybody knew how to do. And there was a stoicism. There was no reason to land at Omaha Beach. There was not a reward financial that you were going to get. There was not territory that was going to be claimed for the United States. It was for an idea. It's really a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And even the revolution is more complicated. There's so many loyalists. It's a civil war. Our civil war is a sectional war, one part of the country against the other. But our revolution was a civil war, and families were torn apart and killed each other. And it's pretty spectacular. But I think with regard to the greatest generation, they had a stoicism. I probably think there is as much, if not more, PTSD out of that war, just because of the sheer number, 16 million people in uniform. Not all were in combat, but do the mathematics. The Vietnam generation is a little bit more exposed. It's in a post-World War II psychological world, analytics, Freudian stuff. It's a war that's unpopular. More than half of the country was against it. So things were exposed and raw, and it permitted people not to retreat. But I found many of the veterans, they lived with it every day. The man who couldn't hold the joystick, he'd wake up after horrible dreams, and she would just look at his hands coming into the kitchen. He's sleeping later because he's having bad nights. Still, successful businessman, good family guy, living a good life, married to his sweetheart who he married, during the war. Now dead. Quentin Annenson was his name, from Laverne, Minnesota. And Jackie would hand him the cup of coffee to the hand that wasn't shaking. So late into his life, that was still a calculus in the morning, which tells you the luckiest people can lock it away and put it away. I can remember things where people would come up to me and say, my dad told us he was in the Battle of the Bulge and they took over a Belgian farmhouse and there was a pretty girl or there was a wine cellar and they all got drunk. And then he watched your thing and you had pictures of these Americans wounded and freezing to death in the coldest winter on record in Europe. And they're being lifted, and we have footage of this, like cordwood, just stacked bodies, like as they're almost cutouts, and thrown in the back of a flatbed. And they said, Dad just lost it. And all of a sudden we heard about best friends that they'd never heard of, that had not been told to fathers or mothers or brothers or wives, certainly not sons and daughters, and they came out. So I think it tells you a little bit about the power of narrative to be able to open up not just the story and tell complexity. And in fact, my editing room has a neon sign in it that says it's complicated in lowercase cursive, because I want people to know that there isn't a filmmaker alive, myself included, that when a scene's working, you don't want to touch it. But we're obligated to touch it as we find out new and perhaps contradictory and therefore destabilizing information. So I want that courage to be able to destabilize, because there's somebody out there who's going to have a revelation. And one of the greatest things is doing an interview and changing reels when we were shooting film and taking the 3 or 4 minutes and you'd hear, honey, or Pop, you never told us that. And so you realized that you were there at the birth of express memory. And some of that memory has been locked away, and understandably the key thrown away in that part of the brain we're not going to go to, but something opens it up. Maybe it's later in life, maybe the loss of friends of that time just dying of old age that survived. Whatever it is, we've been the beneficiaries of people willing to tell the tough stuff. I mean, just in Vietnam, we had a Gold Star mom. Why does she have to, what courage it takes to relive the worst day of her life? when the car pulls up and the doors slam and these guys in uniform and a priest start walking up the steps. She knows exactly what they're going to tell her. And she didn't have to give that to us, and she did. And by giving it to us, we get to give it to somebody else, and that may be helpful for anybody. Somebody still alive, well, somebody in World War II, somebody who's still alive in the Gulf War, Korea, or whatever, or just someone dealing with the half-life of grief, which is, of course, endless. That's what I do for a living. I wake the dead. I'm still trying to talk to my mother, right?
I'm trying to do comedy, bro. Ken Burns, ladies and gentlemen. The movie is called Leonardo Da Vinci.